Hi, it's Winton Churchill with the Barefoot Consultants, and I'd like to welcome you to our call today. Today, we're going to be taking your questions on Facebook Friday. We're also going to be talking a little bit about the superpowers that baby boomers have as we look forward into the end of the year and freelancing and things like the Great Resignation, the trend that many people are going back to work and saying, yeah, I don't like doing this. I don't want to come to an office. I don't want to commute. I want to be on my own. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So if you're just joining us, I welcome you to pop in. Let me pop up our little banner here. Where are you calling in from? Always fun to know that. And yeah, so, one of the things that I do as part of my work and research for writing articles and creating some of the videos in our training programs and that kind of thing is I interview people who are buyers of freelance services. And I like to find out from them what it is that makes a freelancer appealing or not appealing, or a good freelancer versus a great freelancer, and that kind of thing. And there's some very interesting things that have emerged, certainly through the pandemic. And now, as it looks like we're coming out of it, still not quite sure, but it looks pretty good. People are moving around a lot, and the vaccines seem to be working pretty well for folks, and that kind of thing. So, looking towards a back to closer to normal kind of things. I got off the phone earlier today about a live event that we're planning in St. Louis in, let's see, the end of April. So that's going to be fun. And I have an upcoming Las Vegas event. So lots of, uh, live events starting to appear on the horizon, all subject to whatever's going on at the time. But it looks like we are coming into a time where we're going to get some, if we were pilots, we would say we're going to get some better weather. Um, so that's what's up. And we have this thing coming along called the Great Resignation. And there was one article written by well, let's see, it was about a situation at Microsoft where they're anticipating that in certain sections of their business that they will see a 41% reduction, or transitioning of people going from being employees at Microsoft off to being freelancers. And this creates a huge gap within Microsoft in terms of the way administrative things get done, the way that things like PowerPoint slides and marketing presentations and all that kind of stuff get done. There's a lot of work that 41% of people do as part of their business. And, that uh, Microsoft is going to have to backfill that. And of course, we know the labor market is extremely tight right now, and that is a big problem. And so you can't just go out on the street and hire somebody quite as easily as you could. And many of the sort of pay to stay at home kind of opportunities are dissipating. Most all of those have dissipated, so those people have entered the labor market, and they are out there picking up jobs and that kind of thing. So the thought is it's going to get harder and harder to bring people in, especially to large organizations. There's a lot of things not to like about going into a large office building with 1,000 people in it and sitting there all breathing the same air, especially if you're air conditioned or heated or whatever. And we all know a lot more about social distancing and that kind of thing. And in many buildings, it's virtually impossible to social distance. I mean, there's a rotary door at the front of the office building, and everybody's walking right through the same space. There's people's in elevators and that kind of thing. Lots of places where it's very difficult to social business distance. And people are thinking about the great resignation. They're thinking about not having to commute. Imagine how much time it takes. For a lot of people, you get up early, you take a shower, you get um, ready for work, you get into your car, you commute. I think the average commute in the United States, if you're working in an office building, is uh, something like oh, 25 minutes, I think it is, something like that. So you got 25 minutes each way. And so lots of wasted time before you even get to the thing you call work. And so much easier to sit at home comfortably and uh, not have all that extra preparation to get where you're going and start working. So lots of good options as you take a look at that. And the great resignation is expected to, sort of be of great impact over the next 6 months. We'll see, because as more and more people go back in to their organizations, they're gonna sit there and say, I don't like doing this, and look at the options to freelance or certainly work from home. Some companies are letting people, or they're being more flexible about letting employees work for home. Others have strict policies that we're just not going to let that happen. There are some organizations like banks and other financial institutions, brokerage, where there might be a reason for security purposes that you don't want people working from home just because they want everything on the computer in the building with the people in the building. And so that's going to create a problem as well. But lots of the great resignation going on now and will continue. So that's something that uh, baby boomers can, their superpower related to that is the ability usually to work on their own, to do things like, meet deadlines, get the work done, understand the scope of work, that kind of thing. So that's going to be very useful as we go forward. Um, the second thing that I want to talk about is problem solving. And if you think about it, baby boomers and people that are 50 plus have spent a lot of time solving problems. I mean, that's really what your business life, or even if you work for a nonprofit or a government agency or that kind of thing, you're basically solving problems all the time. And every time you're able to solve a problem, that creates in your brain kind of a little template that you can use for solving other similar problems. Because usually when a problem presents itself, it doesn't present all the factors that go into solving the problem. Sometimes you have to find a few different ways to solve the problem. In fact, rarely does a problem get solved by just one simple stroke of the pen or particular action or that kind of thing. It's a process of adjusting yourself to the environment. You go to solve a problem, you make a change, you notice how that change impacts the system, and then you make another change based on what you're learning as you're going along. We've all had bosses who uh, didn't solve problems that way. They would just mandate something, say, this is what we're going to do. And, we've all probably lived through the pain of that, of knowing that there were better ways to continue solving that problem as you went along. So this is a huge piece, and freelancers that are in their 20s and 30s just haven't had the experience necessarily to even know what the factors are that go into solving those problems. And many times they are focused on doing it, quote, by the book, something they learned in college, maybe something they learned in grad school. I know many years ago, the scourge of all management was the MBA programs. And while an MBA can be extremely helpful for people in their careers and understanding what's going on in your business and your organization and that kind of thing, a lot of MBAs had very little experience because they spent so much time in school. So they come out with this very number focused approach. And what they didn't quite realize is that people are part numbers, part human being, and there's a complexity there that interacts. And you can't just, I remember I was working in the aerospace and defense field, and there was a big push to take engineers or software developers that were costing the company a lot of money. They had a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s who were uh, engineers on space systems, on rockets and capsules and satellites and all that kind of stuff. And because they'd been with the organization for a long time and because they had a lot of experience, they were making well into six figures. And the MBAs sort of swarmed over the aerospace and defense industry and said, you know, for what we're paying these senior people here, we could get three brand new engineers right out of college who are up to speed on the latest technology. They're enthusiastic, and we could bring them in at a much lower pay rate. And certainly, three people like that could easily replace the one person that's costing us $150,000 a year or whatever it might have been. And so they did that, and they did it for years and years and years. And all of a sudden, as they started doing that, because initially, you know, their workforce wasn't replaced, but as they started replacing more and more of it that way, they realized that there was a lot of sort of corporate memory, a lot of engineering memory that was walking out the door, and you couldn't just mathematically equate somebody that was making $50,000 a year to three new engineers that were making $50,000 a year, because the engineers that were making $50,000 a year, while smart and competent and enthusiastic, just didn't have those decades of history of solving problems. And, uh, you know, many organizations came to realize that this was something very important to not embrace so quickly. I remember a particular situation where a mistake was made in the launch of a satellite. And when you're launching satellites and you drop a satellite that costs you $1 billion, you know, that's and takes 4 years to build, that's a big problem. You know, that's a huge problem. And you know, shaving, I don't know, 5%, 10% off the cost of developing that. Always people want to develop things less expensively as they learn how to do it better. But when you start carving away at people that know the history of solving problems for satellites and launch vehicles and launch support and on orbit support and all that kind of stuff, you begin to get a very, you know, a very tenuous situation where your safety margins are not as large. Your depth, you know, is not sufficiently uh, configured so that you can tap people that have knowledge of solving problems in different areas. If everybody is new on the block, you're struggling to figure out how to solve a problem because nobody can remember how I solved that. So, very interesting situation with that whole problem solving thing. I mean, that is is something that's very hard to count. IQ kind of gets at the problem solving capability, but it's that capability combined with the data of experience over decades that really makes that person most valuable. Now, the third thing I want to talk about that I hear so often from freelance buyers, people that hire freelancers, is they really want to hire a freelancer that gets the big picture. When they hire a freelancer, that freelancer may be doing part of a project. They might be focusing on PowerPoints for the project, but it might overall be something like a product launch or that kind of thing. And having the ability to understand how your assignment fits into the overall whole of the project is extremely important. And most people don't have, yeah, that's, I'm not sure who this is, but somebody just said that. Let me get this comment up here. Yeah, that's the specialty, solving problems. That is what makes the difference. And so, as the understanding the big picture goes hand in hand with that, because you want a person that understands the importance. Say, if you've chartered them, hired them to write an article, that article is part of a newsletter, and that newsletter has a deadline and it has to go out on time, and they don't want to have to explain to you all those pieces. They just want you to know generally that they have a deadline, and they need it when they need it, and they don't want to hear, hey, I gotta the dog ate my homework. That's just not acceptable. And that's one of the big frustrations of freelance buyers. And I must say, as that comedian says, that the problem tends to be with younger, less experienced freelancers that don't really understand this concept of what you're doing is feeding into something else. And that's why many people make the mistake on that first job they do, that there are this may look like a simple project to you, but it's part of a bigger project. And if you don't get this part right and get it on time, it could impact the timing of the whole project. So this is something that we really want to look at, and something that many 50 plus people don't see this. They don't realize that they have that. And we found that that's something that's very important to emphasize in the larger freelance jobs. When you do have the opportunity to interview for the assignment, the multi-$1,000 assignments, oftentimes you have an interview for those. And understanding that maturity means that this is not your first rodeo. You know how to get in there and make things happen. You know how to make adjustments. You know how all the pieces fit together. So you make sure that your piece fits well into the next part of the project, whatever that might be. And buyers are usually very open to discussing what that is, but when they explain what the next piece is, they can typically explain it in 2 minutes to somebody that has the experience, where it might take them 5, 10, or 20 minutes to explain it to somebody who hasn't had the experience of working on that kind of project. So very important to tap in to that. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. That's what I wanted to cover today in terms of talking about your superpowers and why that might be something that's very important as we go through the Great Resignation and we see lots of reforming of the way people work. I mean, who would have thought 2 years ago, before the pandemic, that as many people that have worked at home were working at home? I mean, we've had going on to 2 years of people working at home, from people that never thought they would do that. So we've got some big changes there as we go forward, and it's really reshaping work, and companies are somewhat stunned, particularly the largest companies are somewhat stunned that people don't want to go back into their office building. And I find that hilarious, because we've been talking about this for 14 years now, about how there's a growing segment of the population that can and wants to work from home. And many large organizations say, we can't have that. And I was interesting talking to somebody just a few days ago about one of the major banks had said, here as we are at the 8th of October, that the bank had planned to bring people back into the office in November. And this is many tens of thousands of employees work for this company. So that meant people going back to work in huge offices in major metropolitan areas, and then in smaller offices in smaller metropolitan areas. And their plan, and they had a date certain to go back in November, and that there was going to be a gradual plan of bringing people back into the office and that kind of thing. And they just scrapped those plans a few days ago because, who knows? It's too early to tell from what they see in the health landscape, looking out there, looking at things like Delta virus and booster shots and all those kind of things. They're concerned that it's too early. And, their tendency from the person I was talking to is usually when they would say, we've set a date that everybody's coming back in, and then they would not adhere to that date. They would set another date so that people could start planning towards that. And it's interesting that what they said, apparently, according to this person I talked to, is we're not setting any more dates. We don't know. Our plan is to get people back into the office, but we can't tell you if we're going to be able to do that. So we got a good set of questions, or let's see here. Let's break this down. Do you have any tips for people like me who can't make up their mind on what to focus on? Well, first of all, I would say this is a common problem. This is as somebody goes into freelancing. I'd like to do technical stuff like research, but people seem to love my writing. So it seems like finding a writing niche would be a great option. I'm just lost right now because so many jobs on Upwork look appealing. And yes, that's true. On all these networks, once you get into them, people are flabbergasted at how interesting and good and fun the jobs are. They just, till you see it, you just don't believe it. So let's break this down a little bit. The good news is you can do both. And sometimes I like the idea of sort of I guess you could say, let the universe decide. And what I mean by that is on Upwork, you can have two specialized profiles. So one profile could be focused on research, and one profile could be focused on writing. And you could look at jobs from both. You could bid on jobs from both, and then you could watch and see where you get the most action. And in fact, you might get a lot of action on the writing, but in some cases, depending on the kind of writing you're doing, it may not pay as well as doing research that taps into your background and your history and your experience. And so just seeing which ones brings you the most jobs won't necessarily do that, but it gives you time to reflect. And I would take 3 to 6 months doing jobs in both areas and see which ones you like the best. That would be my suggested approach to that. And it's it sounds like you have to create two profiles, but that's much easier. You just create the one profile and you kind of create it the way we tell you to create it, and then you take basically a few pieces out of that and drop it into your research profile, and another few pieces out of that and drop it into your writing profile, and it's done very quickly. So it's not rewriting much. It's just adding um, a few bits and pieces. So yes, thank you for that. Glad to help. And obviously, if you want to go into specifics, happy to do that on our Tuesday night call and go into more detail on that. So thanks for the question. All righty. Any other questions out there? Burning issues? What's going to happen next? One of my great things that I've seen happening, just kind of following, is cruise lines are getting cranked back up, and they're doing cruises, and people are starting to cruise now, and that's always one of my favorite ways to spend part of my year is be on a cruise and kind of do it as a remote working sort of cruise. What I like, a lot of cruises are 3-day cruises, that kind of thing. Don't like those so much. I like to go someplace and get settled. I love those 10-day Caribbean cruises or Alaska cruises or that kind of thing. Always fun. And looking forward to getting out and getting some of that fresh sea air and that kind of thing, and looking forward to seeing how the internet connectivity has changed. A lot of the cruise lines were in the throes as they bring on new ships and refurbish older ships, of really upgrading the internet. And my understanding from a few friends that are out there cruising already, that they really like the internet on those ships. It gives them a much easier time of working. Of course, I can remember first taking cruising and working from the road, and I would do it by mostly when I got to a port and go to a local coffee shop or something and do my internet there. And of course, so much of what we do now is video. And video is even harder because you're creating big files, and it's easy when I'm at home in a room doing this kind of thing with my favorite microphone and all my sound effects and music and all the things that I have here. You don't so much have that when you're on the road. And so not looking forward to not having all the goodies, but also looking forward to being out in the live environment and enjoying all the things that has to offer. Oh, this is interesting. Okay, the only cruise I've ever been on was across the Baltic Sea from Stockholm to Helsinki. That's probably a pretty interesting cruise, especially in winter. I recently watched a Baltic Sea cruise in a on a yacht. I think it was about a, I don't know, 60-foot something uh yacht, and certainly surprised me that somebody was doing that kind of thing in a yacht. I saw that as sort of a trip you'd make in a bigger ship. And but I was surprised as they talked about it how frequently there are sort of what I would call smaller sized uh, yachts making that trip back and forth. You got to pick your days and pick your weather and all that kind of stuff. But apparently, a lot of that going on. Although I must say, I love the comfort of a large cruise ship, the opportunity to meet new people and that kind of thing. It's just a great way to get out and see the planet. So with that, I'll bring our call to a close. But before I do, I want to also thank all of those of you that watched this rebroadcast. About 95% of the people that watch our Facebook Friday are watching it on the replay. So we love that. We follow the questions here. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, whether you're participating from our private Facebook group, our public Facebook page, or on YouTube. So thanks so much for attending today. We look forward to seeing you next Friday, or if you're in one of our programs, we'll see you one or two times in between that as well. So have a great weekend, and Monday's a holiday, so enjoy that, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Adios.